Hello, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Before you start the clock, I just want to say that my understanding from class is that we are asked to present around 800 words worth of content into a 3-minute video. I've written an 800-word script and it takes me more than 5 minutes to read it, so I'm sorry for that, but that's what it is. So start the clock now. Haiku. I'm male, white, Australian, 60s, Adelaide, unificationist. 60s refers to my age, not the era. In my early adult life, I spent 25 years in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and Auckland, New Zealand, where I spent the first 8 years of my marriage. Then we returned to my hometown, Adelaide. We bought a house in the street where I grew up and my parents still lived. My uncle lived across the street from us. My maternal grandmother lived with him when I was growing up. So I grew up with my nana living down the street from my home. And then our son had a similar experience. Su Ming, my wife, is Chinese Malaysian. 3-generation households are very much the norm in her culture. It is also recommended in the sermons and speeches of the founders of Unificationism, Reverend Sun Myung Moon and Mrs. Hak Jahan Moon. My religion worldview is Unificationist. We are popularly and pejoratively known as the Moonies. This week, Su Ming and I celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary. We were married with 30,000 couples at the Seoul Olympic Stadium in Korea 1 week after we first met in Sydney. Reverend Moon had matched us about 6 weeks earlier, and we decided, after getting to know each other a bit, that we would go along with his recommendation. During 1976 to 77, I lived in the Unification Church Centre in Melbourne, but they expelled me in 1978 because leaders said I was not suited to living in a religious community. I had undiagnosed bipolar disorder, which was diagnosed in 2011. From there, I spent some time as a barfly in Skid Row in Sydney and Brisbane until members of the Brisbane Aboriginal community took me in and treated me as one of their own. During the 10 years living there, I spent 8 years as a clerk for an Australian government department. For a few years in that period, I was a union delegate specialising in equal employment opportunity. I also did some volunteer work for the Fortitude Valley Police Youth Club with a focus on providing opportunities for marginalised youth. During my AT1 Catholic education at a Worthington middle-class Salesian school, I was not aware of the concept of social justice. Although Su Ming's parents were Buddhist and Confucianist, they sent her to a Catholic school to learn English from the Irish Franciscan nuns. From there, she did her nursing training at a Mercy hospital in Kuala Lumpur. After she graduated, she did volunteer work with a group of nuns who left the hospital, swapped their habits for secular clothing, and provided nursing to the poor and homeless. We both developed a strong sense of social justice from our Catholic schooling and young adult lives. By identifying my social location, I've learned how, as Heidegger observed, my own personal interest and concern guides my interpretation. Jen Zimmerman wrote that the community of tradition to which we belong gives us the lenses through which we see the world. In my experience, this is true as far as unificationists believe that the founders' revelatory interpretation of the Judeo-Christian tradition provides a blueprint for striving for or practicing loving unity and harmony between God and humans, between humans and other humans as brothers and sisters in God's family, and between humanity and the natural and human-made environment. On the other hand, unifications argue a lot about what a unificationist worldview is. For example, in my discussions with USA members, many have expressed the view that the Unification Church owned Washington Times newspaper, and a right-wing Washington Times newspaper expresses God's view on world affairs, even though its journalists are not unificationists. Based on my understanding of what would be a unificationist view on the US and Allies' invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, I opposed them. The Washington Times editorial board supported them, as did many unificationists. I heard in 2011 that the newspaper's founder, Reverend Moon, opposed these invasions. His widow, Hak leads the movement now. Her views for gun control and climate change mitigation, with which I agree, oppose the Washington Times and its readers' positions for limited restrictions on private gun ownership and climate change denial. There is very little independent scholarship on unificationist religious teaching and philosophy. Scholars like Massimo Intervene and Eileen Barker have focused on sociological studies in the context of new religious movements. Within my faith community, we have the Journal of Unification Studies published annually by the Unification Theological Seminary. I am hoping that my coursework and research for the Master of Theological Studies will help me to develop the skills to find whatever there is in the teachings of Reverend and Mrs. Moon that would help to explicate a unificationist view of social justice with a focus on climate change. My presupposition is that it will be very close to Catholic social teaching. Thank you.